Hello everyone. This is going to be a three-part course about sex. We will be covering some topics such as understanding sex in an inclusive way, understanding and breaking down certain social constructs that we've created around sex, getting into some topics such as consent and how it's connected with pleasure. We will also be tapping into some sexual disorders that women experience, along with experiences of abuse survivors and their connection to sexual intimacy as adults. In this first part, we will be talking especially about what sex is and understanding the social constructs that we've created around it. Before we get into understanding the social constructs, I think it's very important for all of us to ask a question to ourselves. What is sex? This is a question that I often find very common answers to. If something came to your mind on the lines of a man with a penis and a woman with a vulva engaging in penetrative sex, then sure, you're right, that is sex, but that is not the only way to have sex. Let me explain. We live in an age where gender is not binary, and sexuality, sexual orientation, gender, all of this has become a spectrum. And as a country, we're progressing into understanding and accepting these differences and acknowledging that heterosexuality is not the only norm of sexual orientation. So, while we understand that, it is also important to understand that sexual experiences can be different for different people. What is considered penetrative sex, as I explained, penis in vagina sex, is the norm maybe for a heterosexual couple, but may not be the same for, let's say, a lesbian couple. A lesbian couple would enjoy maybe handplay or oral sex. Maybe a gay couple could enjoy anal sex. So, sex is different acts, and it can be different for different people from different sexual orientation. So, understanding sex easily can be just simply understanding sex as any act that sexually arouses you. It could be caressing, it could be kissing, it could be fingering, it could be oral sex, anal sex, penetrative sex, anything. But what sex should be defined as should be something that you come up with. Now that we've understood that sex is a broad variety of activities that could sexually arouse you, ranging from kissing to penetrative sex, we need to accept that the social constructs that we created around the concept of sex is also going to be disintegrating in the due course of this session. The second topic that I want to address is virginity. If sex is not just penetrative, if sex is different for different people, then how can we define whether or not someone is a virgin or not based on our terms? Because what if, according to them, what they've had is sex, and what if that is not sex to you? So, this whole idea of virginity kind of shatters there. We believe that any person who has not sexually experienced penetrative sex is a virgin, at least in India. That's the most common popular belief. But now that we've understood that penetrative sex is not the only way to have sex, and people can define sex on their own terms and feel different about different sexual experiences, we can't really gauge whether or not someone is sexually experienced based on the activity that they consider as sex. So, virginity again comes to question. And there's a lot of social pressure around losing virginity or keeping it. I think a little earlier there was a lot of pressure to keep and protect your virginity, but right now we're progressing more towards a space where premarital sex is becoming more and more common, and young people are facing more pressure to have sex and whatever that may mean for them. But I think the one thing that we all need to acknowledge here is that sex has nothing to do with anyone around you, and it has everything to do with you and your partner or partners who are involved. What feels right to you is sex, and when it feels right is when you should do it. There is no negotiation in terms of what the society thinks, what is considered normal, what is considered the right age. Has your friend done it? All of this does not matter. These excuses are null and void. What works for you works for you. And if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. You shouldn't have to feel the pressure to engage in sexual activities because of the society. Now that we've addressed what sex is and how it can be different for different people, it is also important to understand that it is not just different for different people in terms of the sexual act, but it can also differ in terms of the gender of the people who are involved, or the external genitalia of the people involved, or the number of sexual partners for that matter. So we need to start to unlearn what we know about sex and sort of re-establish the boundaries that we've set for sex and understand it as something that cannot be confined into a rigid structure. This has become, it's taking up a different shape right now, a more inclusive, a more queer friendly shape, and I think it's time that we all acknowledge that. Now, let's address another topic that everyone seems to be talking about but don't have a lot of understanding about, which is hymen. A lot of women, especially, have asked questions such as, is the first sex going to be painful? My hymen's going to tear? Is it going to bleed? Does that mean I'm not a virgin anymore if my hymen tears? The funny thing about the hymen is that it's a tissue that's not required for your body. It was there when you were developing in the womb, and it just happens to be there when you're growing, and at some point when you're growing into an adult, it will thin and it will tear. A lot of people won't even realize it when it tears, but some people might experience certain pain and discomfort while it tears. And it need not necessarily tear during penetrative penis and vagina sex. It can also tear during a sports activity, it can tear during stretching, or it could not also tear during a sexual activity. Just because we've had penetrative sex doesn't mean your hymen is torn. And it does not have to be painful. Again, that is also a very subjective experience. It could be painful for some, while not so much for others. But if it is causing severe pain, where sometimes the hymen tissue can grow and a little around, it's supposed to be at the vaginal boundaries, but if it grows a little too much, it can cover your vaginal hole, restricting your period blood from coming out. If that is the case, then you might have to see a doctor. Or if there's anything unusual that you find, then sure, please take it to your doctor. But apart from that, the idea of hymen being correlated with virginity or correlated with penetrative sex is a social construct that we should learn to shy away from. The last thing and the most important thing I want to address in this part of the course is that if there's anything we learned from these few minutes that I've spoken, it is that sex is not the same for everyone. Sex is not what we always think what sex is. Sex cannot be the same experience from person to person. What you experience as sex could be very different from someone who's sitting across the room from you. So assuming and thinking that everything what you're saying is probably true and it's probably sex and that's how everyone's experiencing it can sound very heteronormative, which is, heteronormative is basically when you believe that heterosexuality is the only normal mode of sexual orientation, which it isn't. We are growing towards an accepting space, and in that accepting space we also need to do a lot of unlearning and let this course be the beginning of that unlearning. And a lot of young people who are going through the pressure to either experience sexual activities in social situations because of the pressure that your peers are creating, I just want you to know that every experience of sex is valid. All of your experiences are valid, and what feels right to you and when it feels right to you is something that you should decide with your partner or partners, and it does not have anything to do with the society or the people around you. And we also have this very common idea of purity culture in India, which is basically that abstinence till marriage and saving yourself for post-marriage intercourse penetrative is the right way or the most pure way to do it. But I just want you all to understand that sex is not as simple as pre-marriage, post-marriage. There are so many other things to consider in terms of the trust and the safety that you feel with your partner, whether you feel like it's the right time to explore your body sexually, and whether you feel mutual respect in that space. So try to think about more things before you make your decisions in terms of having your first sexual experience, and not have it defined by the regressive thoughts and the social constructs that the community has decided to put on sex. I hope you've understood a little bit about what sex is and what inclusivity does to this idea of sex that we had initially, and I hope the constructs about virginity and hymen and purity culture have also been a little bit explained. See you in the next course where we talk about consent and pleasure.